I'm guessing they're talking about Operation Mockingbird, which was a disinformation campaign, and it was a legit disinformation campaign. So speaking of pre-9/11 CIA, right? Not that this guy deserves whatever, child of the corn, right? Whatever your name is. There was a very real time when I believe it was Director Colby at CIA who made it a personal mission to ensure that the American public was intentionally misinformed about the Soviet Union completely. Like there's this famous quote out there, I believe it was from Colby, where he said something like, "I won't rest until everything the American public believes about the USSR is untrue." Because he was so dedicated to essentially creating a disinformation campaign against the idea of communism, right? But regardless, it's a perfect example of what this person is legitimately referring to, right? Yeah. Disinformation is real, and prior to 9/11, the agency went recklessly into creating disinformation campaigns for whatever they thought was important, right? Whatever the executive thought they should make an important priority. That's not the world we live in today, and disinformation, misinformation, and malinformation are harder than ever to actually police because there's so much information, things get drowned out. So there's so much good information, bad information, and wrong information. It's so much of it, it's actually hard to intentionally create it because there's so much of it.
Wow. Okay, last audience question before we pivot to my final question. How do you maintain control of your specific goal for the direction of development through a large organization? Is there some, general tips besides the ones that you mentioned of coachability, learn? Those are sort of on the receiving end, but in terms of being proactive, any tools from your work at the agency to apply to such situations or general advice for people to exceed, maybe making use of manipulating, tools of human psychology?
Absolutely. So it's a great question and it's very simple, right? The thing that most people get wrong is they're looking at the next step. It's an amateur move to look at the next step. Have you heard of what's known as a moving goalpost? The next step is a moving goalpost because just like we talked about, every day we create new data, every day we create new natural resources. Well, guess what that means about the next step? It changes every day. What we need to be doing is looking 2 steps ahead. So in the corporate workplace, let's give a very simple example. In the corporate workplace, you have a boss. You shouldn't be looking at your boss for what you should do day to day. You should be looking at your boss's boss. Because if you do something today that fits the needs of your boss's boss, guess what you do simultaneously? You make your boss look good. So you look good and your boss looks good and your boss's boss notices both of you.
That's right.
So now, whether your boss gets promoted or whether your boss's boss reaches down to promote you, you have 2 opportunities for success. Everybody else who's just trying to make the boss happy, they're completely being overlooked by the boss's boss, right? And furthermore, because they're not contributing to the boss's success directly, the boss doesn't notice them either. Okay. So if you want to be one of the few that ride the coattails of the boss and or skip the boss's office altogether and go direct to the top, you need to be thinking 2 steps ahead. How do I make not my supervisor happy? How do I make my director, who is the responsible party for my supervisor, how do I make that person happy? Because that makes everyone in the chain happy. And then when you start to build a reputation of being able to solve problems at the director level, now what ends up happening is people see you as a reliable, trustworthy resource, and they want to incentivize you to stay. So how do they incentivize you? They either promote you or they pay you more. Regardless, you get what you want, right? You get more power, more responsibility, more successful operations. I had, when I left CIA and I first went into corporate America, I had this fantastic senior vice president who was automating everything, right? So I was one of like 15 analysts, and they made it very clear that they were seeking to automate all of our jobs. And for me, I was like, awesome. Like, this is not a job that I want to do anyways. So let's automate it. And that senior vice president, during a one-on-one, when he was talking to me, he was like, here's the deal, Andy. We don't need 15 people. We need 2. And the 2 that we are going to find from all 15 of these folks are the 2 that realize when you work yourself out of a job, there's always a new job for you. The person who can't work themselves out of a job is a useless person. But the person who can work themselves out of a job is a person that you put into another job knowing they will work themselves out of that job too.
It's funny that you mentioned the boss's boss, just to add a little, inside academia. So oftentimes we have to hire professors, they start as junior professors, 35-year-old. And then, it's actually, some of my older colleagues are jaded. They'll say it's worse than getting married, because at least when you get married, you get divorced if it doesn't work, but tenure is permanent. So like some of these people, we spend more time at our workday than we do with our spouses, right? So you're actually literally around your whole life, much more with your colleagues in the academia. So when I'm being confronted with hiring somebody or a position, we all get letters of recommendation. Big deal, right? But what I always do is go to the people that wrote the letter of recommendation. I know what they're going to say. They wouldn't agree to write. No one's malevolent, it's Machiavellian that's going to write a condemning letter of recommendation, right? So I always think, well, let's go to those people. Let's get the letter of recommendation for the letter of recommendation writer. Sort of the same idea, not to please the boss's boss, but actually just to shortcut, like, what is this person? What are their goals? Why are they motivated to promote? Are they trying to foist somebody off? I've done it. I've had bad employees. I was like, you got to get out of here.
Yeah.
And, oh, this is a great employee. Yeah, you should definitely go and work for, Podunk State University.
Freedom! So fresh on me. Freedom!